Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Ruth Thomas. I'm Director of the Global Agribusiness Alliance at the World Business Council on Sustainable Development. We're still letting people in. For your information, this meeting is being recorded. You will have noticed that the time zone is a bit unfavourable for our friends and colleagues in the Americas, so we will be sharing the recording with them after the session. And welcome to today's launch and demo of our new online tool, which has been developed to connect Agri-SMEs with sources of finance. We're really pleased that we've got participation today. We had about 86 people register, I believe, from across the GAA membership, the wider agribusiness community, and the finance sector. And our agenda today and for the next 1.5 hours is as follows. So we're going to start with a short overview by Anita Neville, a founding member Golden Agri Resources, and she's also a member of our GAA steering committee, who'll cover off the origins of and rationale for our role in strengthening agri-SMEs. That'll be quite a short overview. And then we're really pleased to be joined by 4 experts from key partners to share with us just 5 minutes each on their perspectives of the barriers to and also urgency for scaled up access to finance for agri-SMEs. We're then going to move to the kind of third and main session for today's webinar, which will be a demo of our new platform led by Audrey Sellian at Arthur Networks Inc. Audrey's got extensive experience of impact investment in emerging markets and social enterprises and has provided pro bono support for the development of this tool. Audrey, we are really grateful to you. This demo should take around 20 minutes. We'll then share quickly with you our plan for rollout and implementation and move straight to a 20 to 30-minute discussion and Q&A session. So I hope that is what you had expected. It's going to be quite a full 1.5 hours. A quick bit of housekeeping. As I mentioned, this session is being recorded. Please mute yourself when you're not speaking. Feel free to use the chat function throughout, and during the Q&A session, you're also welcome to raise your hand and unmute when invited. We'll be keeping an eye on the chat function. I can still see people are still joining. That's great. So I'm now going to hand to Anita, who'll be able to provide to you a short overview of the rationale for and context of this role that GAA has been scoping and supporting agri-SMEs. Anita, over to, oh, I beg your pardon, before I hand to Anita, the antitrust statement, which we always start our meetings with. Please avoid any conversation around prices or anything of a competitive nature. And if you feel the conversation is moving in that direction, raise your hand and we'll stop it. I can send you this antitrust statement in full if you need it. And now over to Anita.
Thank you so much, Ruth, and thank you everyone who's joining us this afternoon in Singapore time and from around the world. I'm absolutely thrilled to be invited to open this session and to launch the Global Agribusiness Alliance Agri-SME Digital Finance Platform. I would like particularly to extend my thanks to Audrey of Arthur Networks, whose work has been instrumental to bringing this platform to life. I'm really excited that she's going to be able to demonstrate it for you today. So why do we actually need one? And what are we talking about when we talk about agri-SMEs? And perhaps more importantly, how is this actually relevant to the Global Agribusiness Alliance's own agenda? And particularly the work stream that I am responsible for within the GAA, which is work stream 2 on rural livelihoods. Well, very early on in the process, we talked a lot about how we would support smallholders through the work of GAA, as they are fundamentally important to all main agribusinesses. And smallholder farmers are generally the focus of initiatives looking at improving financial access to rural communities, and that's understandable. However, in exploring the evolving rural livelihoods and the role of agribusiness, our first action brief published in 2018, it became clear that there are other important actors in rural communities that face similar financial challenges. These are the small and medium agribusinesses that act as the connective tissue, often linking smallholder farmers and larger agribusinesses, and even through them to the marketplace. Recently, Melanie posted on the GAA LinkedIn a quote from the Africa report that talked about the impact that COVID-19 is having on SMEs. And I quote, "SMEs play a critical role supplying localized and underserved markets, providing rural employment. They are also important for linkages with other small businesses. Like smallholder farmers, these kinds of agri-SMEs are often unbanked, don't have access to affordable or consistent credit or other financial services, and are considered high risk. And in COVID-19, many of those actors who were already vulnerable are really suffering. So there is no better time for us to figure out a way to connect them with access to credit or finance through a digital platform. Through our investigations in this area led by Ruth, thank you Ruth for doing all the heavy lifting as ever, we discovered that there were many people, some of whom you'll hear from this afternoon, who were working on this problem. But the connection with Audrey, I think, was revelatory. As a communications person, I'm a strong believer in building where your audience is, right? And what Audrey brought to the table with Arthur Networks and what you'll see today is a tool that already exists and is being utilized by members of the financial community in a way, structured in a way that they understand from their perspective. And I think that that is really vital if we're to see a significant uptick in being able to create a platform where smaller agribusinesses, through larger ones like my own, Golden Agri Resources, can be connected to the kinds of finance that they need in order to be resilient and vibrant players within rural communities around the world. Today, we're opening this platform to you all. Like any platform, it will only be as good as those who participate in it. The data that is inputted, the active engagement with this tool by people like yourselves, representing the financial community, big agribusiness like Golden Agri, or smaller enterprises, or service organizations that can see projects or communities or small agribusinesses that need that kind of helping hand. So please join us and help GAA build thriving rural economies and communities through the use of appropriate, affordable finance. Ruth, I'll hand back to you.
Thanks so much, Anita. And I think you raise a really important point around building on existing infrastructure to facilitate what I now understand is called interoperability between systems. And that's something that Audrey has brought to us and explained to us, and is a really important feature of the tool that we're going to be showcasing today. I also think you help really clarify why it's important for GAA to strengthen rural social and economic development, which of course is a prerequisite for a thriving agribusiness sector. We're now going to move on to some short external perspectives. We really recognise that there are so many expert individuals and groups that have a real interest in and understanding of Agri-SME finance. And we've got every intention of building on this and connecting with them. So we really wanted to invite 4 of them to share their own perspectives today on the value, the urgency of and barriers to scaling SME finance. We are joined by Bettina Prato, who is the Senior Coordinator at SAFIN. Bettina, I'll let you introduce yourself. Also Thomas Essel, the Secretary General of the African Rural and Agricultural Credit Association. Hans Loth, Global Head UN Environment Partnership at Rabobank. and Alan Johnson, Senior Operations Director at IFC. So I'm really grateful for you. And I'm also really grateful for you to try and stick as closely as you can to 5 minutes. I will actually have to put my timer on, and I will be gently alerting to you as we get to the end of that 5 minutes, because we have got such a full agenda. Bettina, I know that you are on the line. Thank you so much for joining, especially during your annual leave. And the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ruth. It's a pleasure to be with you today. And since it's not a particularly nice weather day here in the Alps, it's not so bad to be connected virtually on a Zoom call, despite being on holiday. So thank you for this opportunity. And it's great to also see some familiar faces on the call. I'm really looking forward to hearing more about the platform. So just a few words of self-introduction. As I said, my name is Bettina Prato. I'm the senior coordinator of a network of about 50 institutions that is called Smallholder and Agri-SME Finance and Investment Network, housed at IFAD. This is a community of actors from both the supply and the demand side of the Agri-SME finance ecosystem that are committed to working together to share, to reach a shared understanding of what are the really strategic issues that require addressing in order to move the ecosystem forward, to share learning, and also to identify opportunities for collaboration around ideally really transformative initiatives, again, around these strategic levers of change. It was established in 2018, and it's now entering a new phase in 2021, 2025. Over the past few years, we've been part of many conversations around why more finance is not flowing towards agri-SMEs, particularly in countries or regions where the business environment for food and agriculture is particularly difficult due to fragility or particular gaps in market functioning and infrastructure and so forth. And I think it's important to realize in that context that, as Dr. Tom Reardon puts it, agri-SMEs are far from being a missing middle, you know, the term that we often hear in relation to agri-SME finance. They're actually a major force, as Anita also mentioned, within agricultural supply chains in Asia, Africa, and other regions. But they are very often a hidden middle, and Dr. Reardon's words, in the sense that their role, their needs, and also the investment opportunities around them are not visible, properly understood and met by a range of other actors, including financial institutions and other types of investors, perhaps corporate investors being a bit of an exception, because typically they have a better line of sight on the needs and opportunities around agri-SMEs than other actors that are part of the supply chain. So the result of this obviously is a gap, not just in volume, but also in the quality of the financial offerings to agri-SMEs. I was just yesterday reading some research that is coming out next week, I think, by the Council on Smallholder Agriculture Finance, that put it $65 billion a year, the unmet sort of need for finance for agri-SMEs in the $25,000 to $1.5 million. And the gap was really magnified by the COVID-19 crisis, you know, where we've seen quite a large number of agri-SMEs across emerging markets really struggling, not just with access to working capital, but also access to trade finance, asset finance, and you know, sort of the ability to restructure loan commitments. So there is certainly quite an urgent agenda to be tackled there. Part of it new, part of it not new. It's often heard in this business that the problem is not money. It's the scarcity of investable or bankable projects or companies. The reality in our findings is that it's really quite a bit of both. And part of that boils down to, I think, what the platform is trying to address or will address, and that is that if the function of markets is primarily to provide information to market players, in agricultural finance, market failures are quite pervasive. There's asymmetry of information that results in high investment and financing risks, but there's also a broader problem of data availability, poor data, and also difficulties in terms of capacity to make use of that data to really improve business models. Technology is clearly a foundation for many of the solutions that have emerged over the past few years. And digital matchmaking is one example of that, but there's much scope to expand access to technology, but also to focus on areas of complementary action. And again, I would emphasize the capacity to make use of information, whether it's in deal origination or in other parts of the financing process. So a couple of years ago, we started, Rose, also this conversation with you, Audrey, and a few others about whether Safin would be the right host for a matchmaking platform. And then we reached the conclusion that it wasn't, but we continued supporting a number of efforts to research and develop ideas to facilitate information flows and also capacity to use information. And we've been particularly interested in supporting companies in their own discovery path, to understand what are the financial offerings in the market, how to understand what type of finance they need. And there are three points, and here I close, that resonate with me, particularly in this journey. And the first is that the market really needs to become more transparent in order for more transactions to flow, and also for the right type of capital to go to the most suitable places in the investment and company growth path. And this means transparency, not just for funders, but also for companies and for enablers. It's really critical that the information gaps that affect all the actors in the ecosystem are addressed, and I'm looking forward to hearing the contribution of this platform to this challenge. The second point is the critical role of complementary action areas like capacity building, the role of business development service providers, for example. Information flows are not enough to improve the market. That is also why it's important for us as a community to know how we can best support the work of this platform and others like it going forward. Third, and then I'll stop, bridging languages and expectations across the investment ecosystem and on the supply and demand side of finance is really very important. The need here is not just to build a market, but to build an ecosystem, and for that, language bridging is really critical. So I congratulate the leadership of Global Agribusiness Alliance in this regard. Artha as well is a very strategic partner, and again, looking forward to hearing more and understanding how we can support this effort going forward. Over to you, Ruth.
Thank you so much, Bettina. Thanks for highlighting the important role of technology and digital matchmaking, and also the need for more transparency in the market. And as you say, absolutely, COVID-19 has for sure shone a spotlight on the vulnerable communities, and SMEs are a good example of some of those. So it's very timely, you're quite right. Many thanks, Bettina, and thanks for joining us today. Thomas, the floor is yours. Please share with us your perspective. Thomas, you may have to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Ruth, for this opportunity for me to meet my friends and discuss this important issue. And I also want to commend you especially and your team for coming up with this innovative idea, which will link agribusinesses and financial institutions. Let me say that Africa, where I work, is a network of over 130 financial and non-financial institutions. And our main objective is to promote lending from financial institutions to agribusinesses, the SMEs, so that they can expand their businesses and remain in business. And this, we have been doing this for over 40 years. Currently, our focus is shifting from the financial institutions to expanding, bringing in also agribusinesses, because we see that they are the ultimate focus of what we are doing. So if we bring them together, then we can better see how these players are playing their role in the agri space. So we have tried to bring in some of them, and the main aim of bringing them is to try to link them, like what you are doing on the platform, matchmaking, to make it easier for some of them to have access to credit. But it's good that you have moved a step higher, and that is very laudable. Apart from that, we have also even requested our financial institutions to have agribusiness units so that they will be focused in supporting the agricultural sector. And I'm glad to say that our membership, which consists of central banks, commercial banks, microfinance institutions, and others, some of them have actually come out with products that are helping the agri businesses. Central banks like Nigeria, in Ghana, in Uganda, have come out with innovative programs themselves that are directly intervening in the market. They've come out with risk-sharing schemes and various products that are directly benefiting the sector. And I am glad also to say that in Africa, where we are, especially sub-Saharan Africa, mobile phone technologies are picking up quite very fast. In fact, in documentation, Kenya alone has about a quarter of all these technological developments to support agri-businesses. And you can see many of them with applications that are helping to promote information on finance, information on inputs, information on weather, and a host, and even information on prices. So you can really see that they are doing something at the sub-Saharan African front. But what opportunities are there if we want to scale? And this is all that all of us are trying to address ourselves to. These opportunities are also found in the same challenges that we are facing. If you look at statistics that we have, it is estimated that Africa's net food import bill is about $35.4 billion annually. This means that we have very high demand for food and food products. And yet, in the midst of all these, Africa also has the potential to produce. Because if you look at all the arable lands that are unused in the world, AFDB documents that Africa has 60% of them. So in the midst of huge imports and in the midst of huge arable lands for agricultural purposes, we have an opportunity of high demand. And this demand has to be met through various means. And I believe that innovations and digital financing are going to be key in satisfying this demand. Apart from that, we also have this high demand for digital services. In fact, in many rural areas in Africa, people are becoming used to telephone and linking them to banking services. And that this is also an opportunity that the digital platform and all the innovations that are coming can exploit so that they can deliver financial services to the agribusinesses wherever they are found, whether they are near the financial institutions or whether they are away. So what makes this demand so urgent? I think that it is so urgent because there are also threats which are facing agribusinesses in Africa. If you have about 60% of your population SMEs, agri-SMEs on the land, and there are threats by climate to food security, then it is urgent that we do something about it. This threat is not only for food production, but also for livestock production. And then recently we have COVID-19, which has also intervened. And so the call for innovation to tackle agriculture is more important than ever. There are barriers. These barriers to scaling up include low levels of illiteracy and digital skills, low access to finance. We have the data gap, not enough data even to design how we want to intervene in the market. Supporting policies are also low, and there are low investments. So looking at all these, what is the value of this digital platform which you have launched? I can see that your digital platform is a strong value statement. And this value statement is trying to link agribusinesses to funding. And it is laudable. We applaud you for starting this initiative. It is going to give more opportunities to both the agribusinesses and the financial institutions. For agribusiness and SMEs, I believe that there will be more opportunity for access, and then there will also be more visibility, even for their own enterprises. And apart from them, it will also expose them to networking with various agribusinesses and financial institutions which can build their sectors. So going forward, I am foreseeing a platform that will not only link these agribusinesses and financial institutions, but a platform that will also go ahead even to have a something like a microsite where these institutions networking, agribusinesses and financial institutions which are successful will also come out to tell their stories of success on a part or a microsite on the platform. And it is something that I want to say that Africa is very happy about it. We are going to support it. We want to work with you. And I want to say that we are ready to work with GAA to deepen and strengthen Africa's use of innovative resources like this platform that you have put up. So by ending, I will say that the director, GAA, and your team have done so well. We are happy you have started this. We have started in a small way, but I believe that what you have will propel us also to move forward. Thank you very much for the time given. Thank you.
And thank you, Thomas, so much for expressing such a strong spirit of collaboration. It's received very, very well and warmly. Thank you. And a great overview, of course, of the barriers and call for the importance of potential of innovative digital financing. Really great to have you here today. We're going to move on quickly to Hans from Rabobank. Hans, it would be really great if you could take yourself off mute, please, and share with us your 5 minutes and your perspective of the barriers to and urgency for scaling finance for agri-SMEs. Over to you.
Yes, thank you, Ruth. And thank you for having me, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody on the line. Shame we cannot see each other live, but we'll make do. Yeah, and I think Bettina and Thomas already mentioned quite a few valid points, which I shall try to not repeat. Also in the interest of discussion and the agenda. My name is Hans Lot. I work for Rabobank. Rabobank is a Dutch bank specialized in food and agri-finance across the world. In the Netherlands, we're a systemic bank, but I I guess today we talk about food and agriculture. Our clients are well represented in all supply chains across the world, ranging from downstream to upstream. Today, topic is upstream. SMEs, farmers have a challenge, and they have a challenge which lies into access to finance. Why would they need access to finance? In general, for the support of a food system change. As a world and within food and agri, we do need a system change for a better world. The climate impact, as Thomas already alluded to, needs agriculture to be more sustainable. And that's a call for action to everybody in food and agriculture. But the SMEs and the smallholders, the smaller farmers, have a few extra challenges, if you will, because without access to finance, there's little you can do. But the farmers are an important stakeholder in that change. So when looking at this, we studied this within Rabobank, and we thought, how can we help? Ironically, many of the rules and regulations that apply to banks prohibit lending to smallholders, simply because they are deemed risky, are difficult to model in risk assessment, and a few other reasons. So that didn't hold us back. So we basically looked at an alternative solution. How can we help knowing this? So we decided to incorporate a fund outside the bank, Agri-3 Fund. And Agri-3 Fund is an open architecture vehicle that is intended to allow banks to lend to SMEs, smallholders, farmers, exactly for that reason that was mentioned earlier on in this introduction today, for systemic access to finance. In essence, a little bit of jargon, I apologize, but in essence, the fund de-risks parts of loans to farmers and SMEs that commercial banks deem too risky. The best example is always a normal tenor maximum. A tenor of a loan would be 7 years, but for a change to more sustainable agricultural practices, one would need 10. So the farmer needs more time, which makes a lot of sense. But if the farmer does not have the tenor and the time in that loan to make that change, and the bank supporting that farmer, it doesn't work. So Agri-3 Fund is exactly intended to bridge that gap between the 7 years, which would be the BAU, the business as usual tenor, and the 10 years, so the 3 years, to make that change happen, to help that SME, to help that farmer to more sustainable practices in support of the full supply chain. So that is the design behind Agri-3. In essence, to help smallholders, farmers, SMEs towards food system change, to support climate change. In essence, to do more and produce more with less land use. The topic of today is really crucial, and the topics that we were suggested to talk about are especially relevant because access to finance is not the magic bullet. It's important. Banks, commercial banks need to step up, and that's an important start. And a platform, as discussed and presented today, is key to that, and it's an amazing initiative. Together with finance, one would need technical assistance, which is key on the ground to support farmers. So that's something that Agri-3 Fund offers as well. Everybody would also agree that in addition to finance, technical assistance, you would need digitalization. And COVID has made that even more clear. To summarize a long story of COVID impact, in essence, COVID has resulted in localization and an increase for automation, simply because global logistics have broken down, at least temporarily. So digitalization and the platform as presented today is key. Why? because it provides access to market, it provides access to finance, but it also de-risks because data are transparent. It also allows us to monitor and standardize SDG impact, because commercial banks, donors, investors are quite keen to invest in SMEs. I think Bettina even mentioned it. Money is not a problem, ironically. The link to the projects is the challenge, the link to the pipeline. And for that, a platform will really help. But that platform will have to be multi-purpose, and it will need to connect several stakeholders, because finance, blended finance, commercial finance is a multi-stakeholder effort between the SME, the supply chain, as also Anita mentioned, the larger players in the supply chain like GAR. They all need to cooperate together. Banks will need to team up, the technical assistance providers, but also the SDG measurement companies. So a digital platform will allow all of that and is key to connect all those stakeholders into making a transaction possible. The execution of a finance transaction is complicated, which in the end has proven to be a hurdle for scale. Because we were invited to talk about, okay, what are the hurdles to create impact at scale? One of them is lack of digitalization, so that we're talking about today. Another one is indeed the complexity of a transaction. So we also need to look at simplifying these transactions. And I do believe that a digital platform is a great step towards that situation. Because when we talk SME, when we talk smallholders, these will be large numbers, and banks will shy away from complexity because time is money, and they will shy away from risk. The digital platform will sort of level the playing field, if you will, and simplify the capability to do transactions at scale. And that is key, and that is what we need today, and we need a lot of it. So it's an excellent initiative of GAA, and really happy to be part of the brainstorm today and see how we can help. So on that note, wrapping up, really happy to be here and listen to some other perspectives that you are willing to share. I do believe we need to continuously repeat calls for action. Rabobank is stepping in and putting basically its neck on the block in a space that is not traditionally for commercial banks. Agri-3 is intended to invite more commercial banks to do the same, because we need scale. We need a lot of scale. We need more money. We need more technical assistance. We need more digitalization. We need more simplicity. We need all of that. And for that, we need a coalition of the willing. And GAA, World Business Council, is an excellent platform for that. So again, Ruth, kudos to you and the team, and thank you for having me, and looking forward to the remainder of the discussion. Thank you. Back to you, Ruth.
Thanks so much, Hans, and thanks for that, again, really great, strong collaborative spirit. I think you're quite right to highlight the importance of digitization, especially during this pandemic and post-recovery stages, and the link that you mentioned between a strong pipeline of projects and the finance, and the critical the critical nature of that link. That's exactly the role and the purpose that this platform has been designed to fill. So many thanks for that. Our last expert speaker, who's going to provide with us some short perspectives, is Alan from IFC. Alan, I will leave it to you to introduce yourself, and over to you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Great, thanks, Ruth. My name's Alan Johnson, and I work for IFC. For those who are not aware, IFC is part of the World Bank Group, but it's the part of the World Bank Group that focuses on investing in private enterprises as the vehicle for achieving sustainable development. It has an investment side and an advisory side, and I'm on the advisory side. And we are very interested in agriculture and have a portfolio of around $3.6 billion in agri. That's by way of introduction. So the risk of being the final speaker is that a lot of the insightful things have already been said, and I'm going to, in a sense, reinforce some of them. I think from our experience, I mean, just to echo what others have said, clearly there is a gap between the financing needs, you know, and what's supplied, and there are various reasons for that which have been articulated. In our experience, there is definitely an issue with the reluctance of what we call formal financial institutions to reach out to smallholders, you know, because it's too risky or the transaction costs are too small or whatever. So I think that we definitely believe that some kind of innovative solution is needed here, and I really appreciate, you know, what Ruth and the team are doing with this new initiative today. So from our point of view, I mean, obviously we do work with formal financial institutions and have some successful projects with them. But I think that we are also interested in, if you like, the wider ecosystem of providers in this space. And I wanted to, I guess, pick up on this whole theme of technology and digitization, because I think from our perspective, this is definitely a priority. We had an event in Addis last year called Digital Disruption in Agriculture, and we're going to do another one this year. It'll be virtual, and that's going to be on the November 18th, 19th. So anyone who's interested, please get in touch with that. But that really is to look at the bigger question of digitization, ag tech, and so on. And then, of course, that has huge potential impacts or links to resolving this financing issue. So from our point of view, you know, there's huge potential with technology, but also, you know, some downsides associated with the digital divide and so on. So some of the applications that we're very interested in do relate to improving access to finance, but I think there's a real sector side and a financing side. So on the real sector side, I think, you know, people have mentioned the transparency, the traceability. I think for us, there are also a lot of potentials associated with digital management of supply chains, which is related to transparency. And that provides a very clear platform or link to the financing side, and information costs are much lower and so on. Capacity building has been mentioned as a priority. We've been experimenting with various digital channels for training, not just smallholder farmers, but again, looking at this wider ecosystem, what we call last mile retailers who are providing, you know, inputs to smallholders. And I think that they can also be brought into this. And then of course, this whole issue of kind of better farm level decision making based around, you know, things that technology can offer in terms of precision farming and so on. So I think there's a whole range of different digital applications, and then how that impacts on the financing side is basically by, you know, making a lot more information transparency available, but then that also some very specific finance related aspects of digitization. And I think this whole issue of, you know, alternative credit scoring methods is something we're very interested in. E-wallets, you know, where transactions can be done digitally without the traditional problems of transporting heavy, voluminous cash, which also, you know, introduces risks of theft and so on. And then, of course, this vexed question of interoperability, because I think there is a paradox here that many providers want to become, you know, the next big thing, and they resist. Anyway, I think this is definitely a dilemma in this space, that interoperability is an ideal situation, but not everyone who's playing in this space wants it. So I think in the interest of brevity, I'm going to close it off there. So I think what I'm basically saying is technology has a big range of possible positive impacts across the whole space, and, you know, that's real sector and finance sector as well. But I don't want to kind of overgloss the whole, you know, the possibilities. There are big possibilities, but there are also serious issues around the digital divide, the lack of digital skills, and so on. So perhaps I'll leave it there, and just to thank the organizers for the invitation. Great initiative. We're really looking forward to participating ourselves in this. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Alan, and thanks for also highlighting that these are the possibilities and potential of technology, and there'll be a lot of hard work moving forwards to realise that, for sure. No person better to use your comment around interoperability as a segue into the main session for today's webinar, which is where I get to hand to Audrey Sellian, who has been the pro bono lead for the development of this platform. Audrey, I hope you can feel and have heard our oozing gratitude to you for your wisdom and insight and time and resources and expertise on this space. So I am going to hand to you. I believe you do have presenting right, so you should be able to steal the screen share from me and share your screen for the demo, but let us know, just take yourself off mute and let us know if there's a problem. But over to you. Thank you, Audrey.
Thank you so much to you, Ruth, and to all the team. Let me just express what a privilege it is to be among you in this community, and what a learning experience it is for me personally and for our group. I will initiate the screen sharing in a moment. I think it should be fine. I think it's working. I'll just start with maybe a minute or two of laying the context and an introduction, which may be helpful, and then a mention of the importance of interoperability, which is one of those words that, yeah, just it's a labyrinth once you enter it. I've had the privilege of being part of a dedicated advisor to a family office for about 15 years now, and as part of the work involved, building an impact investing portfolio in India was our primary goal, and our goal really was to deploy capital into last mile service businesses, including agri and energy, and we've changed sector focuses a little bit. Agri is the one that still remains very much front and center. We now also include health and education and skills. And all of these businesses have been in India. And we've just been one of many small private players trying to use the benefit of our agility to deploy capital into these businesses by virtue of a regulatory environment that's a little bit more stringent than many others. We have been limited to equity investing. But the mechanics, the really practical mechanics of just getting this work done, appraising these investments, of finding the deals, we found to be very challenging. And so the idea of setting up a system for our little world of impact finance in India came to us in 2008. And we set up the first version then of this system. So really, and I will share with you the details of this system and its multi-sided nature, and of course the challenges of it in the absence of the fantastic collaborative spirit that I see in this group and in this network and in these members. It's very difficult to make these systems work simply because the convener and the frame that's held around it must be seen to be, in some sense, neutral, must be seen to have the interest of its members in mind. I think everybody has to feel that, like, viscerally and personally, in order to really feel like, we can contribute and we can be part of this fabric of this ecosystem. So I'm going to stop there with my with my high level context and go into the system itself, and I will try to keep it focused and really just looking at enterprise profiles to begin with, and a little bit of the investor profile and what investors are asked or urged to do. The premise being that no single fund, vehicle, or investor has all the capital that's required to service an entire pipeline of opportunities if that pipeline is rich. There's lots of different kinds of capital. There's debt, there's equity, there's some grant. There's a lot of different varying needs that are ever changing. And so the idea of having an ecosystem set up, like supported by technology, is that there's simply, just very simply visibility on what's there, who is broadly doing what, without, giving away any, proprietary information, and allowing for channels of collaboration to exist. So with that, I will launch my screen. I hope that it's visible. Yes?
Yes, we can see it, Audrey.
Okay, great. So this is a landing page which broadly captures the messaging and positioning of the GAA's finance platform, which is available now. It's online and visible to everyone at invest.globalagribusinessalliance.com. What I'm going to do is show you the inside of the system from the perspective of the master administrator for one moment, and explain that the GAA is going to be attempting to populate first a pipeline of investable opportunities, and then with all of you and all of us together to populate the onboarded investor profiles, many of which already exist on parallel systems. I should mention as a sort of a framing comment as well, that this is a customized and sort of GAA painted version of a system that's being used by others as well. So we have a version in India comprised of Indian deal flow, Indian portfolio with a different community of investors. The Aga Khan Development Network is using the same system in Central Asia, capturing gender lens businesses. So when we talk about interoperability, we're talking about the ability of such systems to be tied together at a bottom layer, whereby users can traverse across systems if they are so inclined. There's no mandate to do so, but it is an option. So it's one way of trying to grow, again, the expansive perspective of each individual user. Essentially, inside this system, we have a couple of different types of users. We have investors, we have enterprises, and they can be defined and segmented in many different ways. We also have service providers who are in country, typically consultants, technical assistance providers, auditors, legal counsel, anyone who's critical to the completion or execution of a transaction. And enterprise support organizations as well, who are associative bodies in a particular region, just like Africa, bodies whose work is to cultivate pipelines of great enterprise interventions and solutions. Enterprise support organizations are really important here because they not only provide a point of reference as well for incoming enterprises who will become part of this pipeline, but they'll also be always sourced to the ESO. Today, for the purposes of the demo, to keep things focused, I'm just going to focus on enterprises, and I'm going to give you a view of a couple of sample enterprises, which you'll see it's pretty it's visual, it's pretty simple, and I will get into a couple of the different profiles, all of which are sample profiles containing dummy data. Each company is essentially asked to fill in some basic information about, who's their leader, where they're based, the SDGs they serve, whether they're currently seeking financing, and a little bit of information about their business profiles, including, the type of structure they have, their sector of specialization, this number of employees, those kinds of things. A lot of these fields are easily customizable. We also have space for a little bit more elaboration on the summaries, something about strategies and products and services and advantages and patents, if any, etc. When it comes to populating and making this a living profile over time, each entrepreneur at the helm of each enterprise can also use this as a reporting tool, to very basic reporting. I mean, not at the moment it's pretty nascent, but we allow for reporting on a quarterly basis against revenues, operating expenses, EBITDA. One can submit budgets and have indications of whether they're on or off target from their budgets, as well as submission of impact metrics. So all profiles essentially have space for providing this type of color. It's a way of capturing what's going on. There's also some minimal sharing of information around financials. None of this is mandatory. It is purely at the discretion and prerogative of the enterprise to present themselves. There may be also public documents visible, like brochures and white papers and business plans, or private ones for when an investor decides to enter a due diligence process. So the premise of our design, and this is the second company I'm showing. This is another company. It's a sample company, quasi-fake. Revolution Foods does actually exist and focuses on providing healthy meals for school children in the US. But I borrowed their name and their logo and set up this profile. The important element about the enterprise profile is that not every company is always in a pipeline raising money, right? Every user, every enterprise user can look at an enterprise view and look laterally across their peers in a pipeline, in a system, and see broadly. And by the way, we have taken the liberties of populating the system with some of your names. So this is some of it is dummy data. So if you see your company or your name, it's purely because we've been playing with content. But what this allows an enterprise to do is see across the system and see broadly what sectors are being served, what countries, and other fields that are going to be customized. Inside the actual company profile view, it's very easy for the user to completely adjust all of this information. So there's an edit view, company, financial, impact, and so on. There's also a user profile view, which is, the individual, as if my name was Lakshmi and I could set up a little bit about my background and share my LinkedIn profile. These are indeed for those users who are very tech savvy or a little more literate and who are really getting into this and filling this out. Again, none of this is mandatory fields. None of these are mandatory fields. These are really just the fields behind the company profile. As I said, companies are not always raising money. You may need a loan in Q4 of 2020, and then you may need an equity injection in the spring of 2021. In every instance, one is able to set up and provide the details of what their requirements are at any given time. So in this case, this company called Seed Start is launching an equity round. Let's say they're raising $230,000. They're able to provide the color of their proposed use of funds, possibly because of this is an equity round, possibly share the details of their pre-money valuation, a little bit of information about their monthly cash burn, et cetera, et cetera. Again, these are many optional fields, but these are helpful for the investor to have a look. So having shown you some of these enterprise profiles as samples, I'm just going to do a quick switch into an investor profile to show you what an investor experiences looking at this pipeline. So I've logged in here as an investment manager called Juliana from a fund called Beyond Profits. And investors, just like companies, are able to cultivate their online profile and share a little bit about who they are, what they're about, how many years of impact investing experience do they have, or straight equity investing, how many investments do they have to date, what is their typical ticket size, what's their total funds under management, those types of details which entrepreneurs who are diligencing their prospective partners will often like to know about. Each investor will be able to basically look at a network and connect with any other investor on the system. So as you'll notice here, the user types are reflected in these headings above. Investors can connect with one another. They can also connect with enterprises. It's key to note that for the moment in our design, and this is again something we can change, but for the moment, investors can add anyone they want, including their peers. Entrepreneurs or enterprises and other user types can see the investors, can see their profiles, but can't connect with them unless the investor connects with them first. So this is just, for the moment, one of our default design settings. We will test this and see how this goes. But in the India system that we run, we have found that investors tend to wish for a little bit of a barrier against the tidal wave of incoming requests. So the investor prerogative is essentially to go to this pipeline, which I just clicked on. And once at the pipeline, to be able to apply whatever filters are appropriate. Now we can have ag sector specific, more detailed breakdowns to be able to be applied to these filters. One can also search by country, investment stage, investment size, diligence status, or SDG. The point is that when an investor, again, is seeing these companies and wants to have a look at a deal and says, okay, wow, that looks really interesting. The actual action of adding to a portfolio is something that is visible in the network to those investors with whom this investor is connected. So you can also have private deals, but for the most part, the capital needs of these deals at the last mile are often quite varied. And it's in the interest of the investor to be able to ensure that co-investment, hybrid, blended financing is possible. So I've just added a company to my portfolio. And as you'll notice, as an investor, I have both a platform portfolio and a private one. My platform portfolio now will show, I think I clicked on another one before, a couple of companies that I've been looking at. And here, if I have started diligence, it's something that shows on the system, and particularly now in the COVID context that we're living in, due diligence has never been more difficult to execute. So the goal here is to be able to take, a diligence process that's customized for an investor. So we have diligence templates. I have a generic one that I'm applying here. We can also have very specific diligence questionnaires and templates that can be applied. That's very easy to import. And the diligence process is sort of an exhaustive series of questions. There are modules, and I'll read a few of them. We can look at, and one doesn't have to use any of this, by the way, but it's just there as a point of reference. Social impact, gender lens, operational analysis. Each one of these modules is comprised of anywhere from 5 to 50 questions. These are suggested questions that one can apply and answer in the process of a due diligence. Critical to this diligence process is that right down here, there's a virtual table. At the table right now, I'm the investor called Beyond Profits. The company I'm looking at is called Revolution Foods. Anyone else that I need at this table, I can invite in to the process. I can say that it's really important that the Leaf Fund also joins me, because I know that they're able to deploy well-priced patient debt. And I may also need if Africa was on the list, maybe I need Afraka at the table as well for Thomas's perspectives. You can add whomever you want at the table. You may view their profiles, remove them from the table later on if one wants to narrow the scope of the discussion. This is a closed and secure process. People can then go into this diligence process, look at the individual diligence questions and assign them. So I can say, I'm going to do 50 of these questions. I've also just brought in somebody who's actually based in, let's say Revolution Foods was based in Cairo, and I need somebody on the ground in Cairo to help out. I can add somebody there and assign them questions. And of course, if I don't want to use this process at all, that's fine as well. We've already, the key has been just the visibility of the deal, finding the deal, seeing who else is looking at the deal, being able to also just understand, you know, the latest, greatest, the news of the business. This is already, as a diligence exercise, sometimes beyond what people need. Sometimes all you want is due diligence specific messaging. So we have a little bit of a mini Slack board where one can have targeted discussions, and you can also have uploads of due diligence specific documentation. So I'm going to slow it down. I just wanted to demonstrate that due diligence as a process is something that is, it can expand or contract depending on what the lead investor seeks. And when another investor logs in and wants to take a look at Revolution Foods, well, they'll see that I, at Beyond Profits, am already running a due diligence process. They won't see the substance of it, but they'll know that it's happening. And truly, this comes back down to a little bit of heightened efficiency that we as impact investors could certainly think about and implement more consistently in our work. I have been on, I would say, probably 100 field trips over the last 15 years, and looking at different companies, only to realize that the travel all the way out to see XYZ in, you know, the outer, in Kanchipuram in Tamil Nadu, or in the outskirts of Bangalore, wonderful, but 6 other investors just did the same trip. So why can't we actually find a way as impact investors to signal to one another and selectively collaborate so that the costs are a little bit lower and the time requirements from the entrepreneurs are a little bit more efficiently managed? So I'm going to stop, and any questions are most welcome, but I hope that I've been able to convey the basic essence of what we hope to achieve with such a tool. Obviously, articulating very clearly that this is just one part. It's just an enabler. It's just one part of what we think will be helpful to the ecosystem that is convened by the GAA. And it's all about you all and fulfilling your needs and ensuring that, you know, your interests and the companies that you want to highlight and elevate are made visible to the wider group. The tool is not, like with any technology, the tool is not an end in itself. It's about the curation, it's about the people involved, and it's about the intention. So with that, I will say thank you and welcome any questions.
Thank you, Audrey, so much. A really good overview of the potential, as you say, of this tool. We have actually had a question in, which I think is quite topical, just to address now, before we cover off quickly the implementation plan. You showcase to us the kind of full options of information disclosure for enterprises and deals. But the question is, for many agri-SMEs trying to access finance, they're not at the stage where they are able to provide all the information that's required. How can the platform address that? So could you just clarify for us the bare minimum? So what information is required? Because a lot of the stuff that you have been able to share with us today is the extent to which and the opportunities for disclosure rather than the bare minimum that is required.
So the bare minimum for one to set up a profile consists of first name, last name, company, and email. That's it. There is, if one wants to just simply be visible in the pipeline and share nothing, they will still show up on searches. They can still be interrogated in a due diligence exercise that is closed. So there is, I guess, there is a pretty low bar in terms of disclosure requirements or mandates. The entryway for enterprises there are two ways to get into the pipeline here. One is obviously to contact the Global Agribusiness Alliance and to have, the team at the GAA utilize this tool to import a spreadsheet of enterprises, again, with just those 4 fields as the minimum requirements filled out. The other way would be to go in from the landing page and click on Join Now and go through this little process, which is very basic. It does ask you to articulate what type of user you are. And then really it's just about setting up your name, your account, and very basic information on your company profile. That, however, would be subjected to the GAA team's review inside the dashboard to assess whether that request should be let in, should be approved, and that person, from anywhere allowed into the actual company list or investor list. Any user type can come in that way.
Thanks, Audrey.
Ruth,
yes, Anita.
Sorry, if I could just build off that, I think there's a great opportunity for those of us who are GAA members and the larger agribusinesses to act as facilitators for projects and communities that we're working with to access the platform, to begin that role of population, and then provide to some level some of that capacity building that other speakers earlier on have spoken about, in order to help with that, both digital and financial literacy as needed. That's certainly something that I anticipate, and I know a couple of them on the call today, my GAR partnerships team, I anticipate would play part of that role to help populate the pipeline.
Thanks, Anita. Absolutely. All GAA members at the moment have obviously been registered as enterprises. So there is the ability for each of these members to then invite their smaller suppliers to participate and register on this platform and populate with their deals. And I'm just, Audrey, do you think you're done with the sharing just for now? Because I'm just going to pinch back and share the implementation plan briefly.
Absolutely. And I will just reiterate that every user type on the system can invite others into the system. And ESOs, enterprise support organizations in particular, would then be shown as a referral source or deal source, so that they're, in the event of a future monetization strategy of the platform, that granular contributions be tracked and rewarded for those who are bringing in the most viable, most interesting pipeline.
And exactly to the potential and possibility of building this pipeline, that is where our energy and effort is going to be focused hard and fast, particularly in the first 6 months. So this slide shares with you just a quick summary of our implementation plan. We have developed a user guide. We have also ring-fenced funds to enable the translation of this tool and the guide into 2 languages, depending on uptake and appetite. Our target for the next 6 months is to make sure that all, of course, GAA members are using it and that we have a minimum of 10 deals in the pipeline. We are providing free access and full support to eligible agribusinesses in this first 6 months. So we will be implementing a really proactive engagement plan through our members, suppliers, and partners, and broadening our outreach through promotional opportunities and demos. Thank you for some of the suggestions for those platforms and initiatives that have come into the chat box. We are putting together a small network of what we call GAA ambassadors. I know a couple are on the line today. Thanks for joining. These are individual experts in key growing regions who have direct relations themselves with target SMEs that we will be working with and training on this so that they can act as our partners in implementation plans. We're also in conversation, of course, with the BCSD network within WBCSD, so the regional and national partners of WBCSD, many of whom have good networks and members in the kind of Agri-SME sector. And then after the first 6 months, and I should add that the pro bono support from Arthur Network Inc. will include that first 6 months. There will then be a small maintenance charge for GAA of, it's not a significant charge, and that's within our operating budget, but we will refine our business model obviously at that point. And our target from March 2021 is to double, of course, the deal pipeline during that first year. And we will be engaging more proactively with the investors and providers of finance during that second phase. So there's a lot of detail obviously behind this. There's a lot of hard work that we need to do. We're really looking forward to building on the expertise and networks and partnerships that we've established and would like to strengthen. And wanted to share with you that how we envisage and how we intend to resource the implementation and rollout of this really exciting new tool. So we have now got just under 15 minutes, so it's a little less than I'd hoped, for some interaction, for some comments and suggestions, any questions that people on the line may have about the implementation plan, about the tool, about the rationale. We did actually have a question come in, Hans, when you were speaking. I'm just going to try and revisit, hold on one moment, the chat function. So
Ruth, maybe while you're searching for that, can I just also encourage, I know that there are some colleagues from Mercy Corps out of Indonesia who are on the call. Thank you for joining us. Can I just encourage those of you who work as partner organizations or implementation partners and other NGOs who may have networks or know of networks of projects or potentially fundable Agri-SMEs, or you have a place in this ecosystem as well. And we encourage the participation of groups like Mercy Corps and others to help us find those projects that are in need of funds to help us build out this pipeline. So I think Pat Andy's on the line as well. Pat, be very happy to follow up with you and our colleagues in Indonesia on opportunities there, but anywhere globally.
Yeah. Thank you, Anita.
There's a question about minimum investment amount for transacting on the platform, Ruth, from Christian at Halcyon.
Yes, thank you. There is. Audrey, that's one for you. We've talked about this before.
I mean, it can be relatively small. We've typically seen as small as $40,000 or $50,000 in some cases. In other platforms on the Aga Khan version, the investment amounts are as low as $8,000 or $10,000. So it's just a function of the contextualization of these amounts in a pipeline. If something is going to be radically bigger or smaller, it will certainly show. I think it's kind of a strategic question from the GAA perspective, and we typically are looking at anything from typically from $40,000-$50,000 up to $1 million, and so the focus remains really relatively quite small.
And Audrey, Bettina has actually asked a kind of related question. We haven't talked about this yet, but it's an interesting point. And she says, does your target have any breakdown in terms of whether you are looking to get at least a given share of the deals within a given dollar bracket? to ensure that this actually gets financed also at the lower end of the SME market, which I think is very pertinent and speaks to the kind of broad range of SMEs. So we haven't yet, and it will be interesting to see what our conversations with partners and agribusinesses and our members elicit that. I wonder if, Audrey, you think that would be a sensible breakdown to weave into some of our targets? We probably need to assess the market a bit more fully, I would have thought.
Ideally, if for example, those on the call and members are willing to refer at least 2 to 3 viable opportunities to the platform, it will be a little bit easier to then look across the listings and to determine what sorts of weightages are reasonable and should be set in terms of particular dollar brackets. It's a little bit hard to say without having real reference points. But I suspect, I mean, this task of very high transaction costs on due diligence is very typical of SME financing, you know, certainly up to $1 million. And now with COVID and the inability to travel, and those costs have just like shot up and it's become even more complex, especially when it comes to the monitoring and the post-investment work. So I think it's going to be interesting to be able to set particular targets. And we, you know, I think we have to just wait and see. The key here is, of course, that, and I see, just to refer to some of the mentions of particular fund vehicles, particular, you know, dedicated, it could be accelerator or incubation models, whatever support may be there. I mean, the point of the system is simply to be able to capture and elevate examples of where this is happening and for whom, so that those who would be engaging investors, new private wealth funds dipping a toe in, a social venture capital fund, an emerging market PE fund, so that we are able to provide some context without compromising some of the, of course, the confidentiality and proprietary nature of these transactions, because everyone has a different perspective on that.
Audrey, the questions are coming in now as I flick through them. Sharing a criteria to be met by enterprises to join the platform. We've had one on the potential for funding youth in Nigeria. Thank you, Anita, for answering that.
So yeah, I can try to speak to the criteria, and of course, this again is a function of this brainstorm and a conversation. The criteria that, for example, we had set for the Indian enterprises in the pipeline was that they should be trading. That we did not really want to work with, you know, ideas, seed stage ideas that were not realized. For example, in India, it may be different in this context. But it's just a matter of having that clearly articulated and conveyed on the landing page, so that, you know, it would be a little bit easier for us to be able to get in and understand, like, that we're looking at an actual incorporated entity with, you know, some sort of trading underway. That, I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah, it is. And actually, I should have said at the beginning of this session that we're going to be using these questions to help draft a simple FAQ for users of this platform. So we're actually taking a careful note of these questions that are coming in, because that will help us make sure that we can preempt some of this really fundamental and important stuff as well in advance. We've had a related question, Audrey, around clients in sub-Saharan Africa who are looking at investments of lower than 10,000. And I think, again, that speaks to your comment earlier around the scale being quite broad, that the scale of funding being quite broad, but around, you know, an incorporated entity that is at least trading being perhaps some key criteria.
Yeah, I mean, the smaller the smaller the ask, the smaller the investment ticket, the less it makes sense for investors coming in to engage, right? Especially from the outside. So the opportunity to bundle, to aggregate, to find other ways to make these types of interventions palatable, I think is an open strategic question for those in the group. There may be those who are involved in extension of credit and who are specializing in debt and who may be looking at a specific region, who might be able to scoop up, 6 or 10 or 12 entries of opportunities that are just under the 10K mark. Again, less interested in being prescriptive, more interested in ensuring what, an analysis and understanding of what's coming in, making it visible, and then figuring out, what is a community of donors and funders and investors we can do. There's a question, Ruth, as well, about GAA being a supply side platform.
Yeah.
Focus and reach. And then the question being that this platform seeks to contribute to address not only limited to supply side SMEs, but also to demand side SMEs.
Yeah, hi, Emmanuel, thanks for joining. The mandate for GAA is to strengthen the supply side voice and contribution and performance. So our priority for providing free access and implementation support will be to supply side agribusiness companies. We've had a question as well around personal data protection regs. Certainly WBCSD is of course in full compliance with GDPR. Audrey, has this come up with other modules and users of your site? I'm assuming it has done. Yeah. So
we have to ensure that the process of signing up and the opt-ins for how data is used and stored on the system are fully GDPR compliant.
There's a question around due diligence. In doing due diligence, one could find different risk profiles of agribusinesses in the areas or regions of operation. Is there a way to help such agribusinesses in those regions?
I thought this might be an opportunity, Audrey, for you to talk about the tender function as well, and how agribusinesses can seek help from experts. So maybe to lead you into that area.
Sure, if I may. And I don't know if it's worth doing a screen share, if I can just talk through it. But all enterprises on the system, I mean, all user types on these systems. I mean, the reality is we try to go in with a view to executing our strategy. And very often we'll find that we don't have the tools. We don't have the knowledge, we don't have the context, and enterprises specifically may not have necessarily the well-honed materials, the business plan, the financial model to bring forward. We've built a tender mechanism into the system, and tender, it's kind of a request for help. It's a mechanism that allows for each user, and enterprises as well, to articulate what it is they need, by when, and for how much, because everyone will have already a budget in mind. And that sort of call for help will be broadcasted to all the service providers who are sector-specific, dedicated, profiled, small businesses. They could be individual consultants, they could be groups, they could be, active advisories working in a particular niche and WASH, for example. They will then receive this tender and be able to bid and respond and say, I'm 60 miles down the road, I can do this work for you. And that user will be able to compare incoming bids to be able to ask for and draw on the support that they need. There may even be a space or a way that some of that support can be offered pro bono, possibly from enterprise support organizations who are often, incubators and accelerators do a lot of that work and don't necessarily always charge the enterprise as their model. So there's also those opportunities. And so the discovery of the ESOs is also part of the system. And those ESOs can be in country. They can, because this is a global system, there's going to be listings from all over the place. So I don't know if that helps to answer the question.
I think that's great, Audrey. And we also went through other interesting functions, such as being able to tap into deals from even other sectors operating in a similar region, which I think is a really exciting potential, especially given the interest that folk have in landscape and jurisdictional action. We are going to have to wrap up now. We are exactly on time. Thank you so much for joining, everybody. Thank you so much for your questions. We've taken a note. We will absolutely be sending you follow-up to this. We want to keep this conversation going. Your involvement and participation is key. A special thank you to our speakers, Bettina, Thomas, Alan and Hans this morning, thank you. And Anita, of course, for leading on our workstream too. Audrey, we couldn't have done this without you. Thank you very much. This is the beginning, of course, not the end of our concerted effort to scale access to finance for agri-SMEs, and really hope that we can collaborate and collectively work together on this journey. Thanks again so much for joining. Really nice to see so many of you here today. Have a great day, evening. Bye for now.
Thanks,
Thank
Ruth.
you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Audrey.
Ruth.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Ruth.